what is this? This is not field curvature. And contrary to popular belief, many SCTs might not correct for some of it. So what is it? Here's the setup. You've got a new telescope. You take it outside for its first night of imaging, and the stars look weird. They're not circles. So what is going on? We're going to examine the most common types of aberrations in your images and how to fix them. We will look at examples for each one. So the problems can be grouped into three main categories. You might learn that you need to return the new scope because there's nothing that you can do to fix it. Welcome to Deep Sky Detail. So this is my Sharpstar 130 hyperbolic Newtonian. Boy, do I like this scope. It's fast, it has decent aperture, and it was much less expensive than comparable refractors. But it took me a couple of weeks to tune it and get it right. And that was partly due to wonky star shapes. Okay, so let's get into some definitions before we begin. Like this one. So for our purposes, on axis means the point at the center of your field of view on your sensor. There's really only one point in the whole sky that your telescope is pointing at that is on axis. And that's the point of the sky in the very center of the field of view. All other points are off axis, which means that light enters at an angle relative to the axis point. So the next thing is, here it is, right there. Oh, almost fell. Is an image circle. When your lens or mirror focuses light, ideally it creates a circle of light that shows an image of what it is pointed at. Okay, next one, diffraction. So I'm not going to focus on diffraction too much, but diffraction is just light spreading out as it hits the edges of your telescope aperture or your lens, your secondary mirror, etc. So combined with seeing, this makes everything kind of blurry. It's unavoidable unless you have a telescope with infinite aperture. And the aberrations I'll show you in the examples assume diffraction and seeing effects. So if your seeing is really bad, it can be really difficult diagnosing bad star shapes. Now, I'm not an expert in optics. This is just what I've learned trying to collimate different telescopes over the years. So if you are an expert in optics, feel free to chime in the comments. Okay, let's get into the theory for why your stars aren't perfectly round. But we'll use our eyes as examples. So when light comes and hits my pupil from a point in space, like a star, the light is essentially parallel. So if I'm here and light from a star is coming straight at me, because I'm looking directly at it, it enters my pupil and goes into my retina. But if I walk 10 feet away to the side, the light that enters the center of my pupil from that star is essentially parallel with the light that was hitting my pupil 10 feet away. This is because the star is so far away that the distance of 10 feet is negligible in terms of the geometry. Now, let's think about your pupil itself. So if light from a star seen 10 feet away is parallel to what the light is hitting my retina here, well, then it stands to reason that light that hits the edge of my pupil from the same star is also parallel to the light that's hitting the center of my retina. You want all of those parallel lines to be focused on one spot. If your eyes see pinpoints of light, then you have well-collimated non-astigmatism eyes. If those parallel lines do not hit one spot, the star will have a wonky shape. This is the key to understanding bad star shapes. So let's take a reflector telescope whose mirror, if you extended it, would make a sphere. We'll call it, I don't know, a ball mirror because it makes a ball. So ball mirrors, what? Balls, telescopes implies the outer surface and not the inner surface. And what's that again? People might get the wrong idea. Oh, okay. All right. So Dr. Detail just informed me that they're not called ball mirrors, and that's probably a bad name. So he also said there's a name for these type of mirrors, and they're called spherical mirrors. So let's take a look at what happens when light bounces off of a spherical mirror. Let's look at the very center. It bounces off and goes straight back, if it's on axis. That's nice. The focal point should be somewhere on this line here. Now, let's take a look at parallel lines some distance away from the very center. These are also on-axis lines, and they are parallel to the very center line. They all bounce off and converge at the same point. So far, so good, right? Well, wrong. So let's take a look at the position of the focal points depending on where the light is hitting at different concentric circles around that center. They're all hitting different spots. So a spherical mirror has the same curvature no matter which direction the light is coming from. So every part of the image is going to have the same problem. What this means is that you can never get perfect focus with a spherical mirror. All your stars across your whole field of view will look blurry. That's not good. So this is what the field of view of stars would look like with just spherical aberration. So how can you fix it? Well, every astrophotography telescope tries to fix it in one way or another. So this is the one aberration you probably don't need to worry about because you've got a telescope that fixes it. But telescope designs that do fix this can introduce other problems, which is what most of this video is about. So I hear some of you saying, but what about stars off to the side? How come they don't get focused on the same spot on your retina as a star that you're looking straight at? Aren't those also parallel lines? Well, you're right that the light is parallel for any particular star. They are off-center of my pupil. That light is not parallel to the light coming from the star on axis. Because of that, it gets focused on a different part of my retina. Where it focuses depends on the angle that the light is coming from relative to my pupil. Interestingly, all of these focus points create a focus curve, and your retina is curved. So a well-collimated eye is able to focus onto a curved surface. That's pretty cool. Field curvature affects basically every type of simple telescope design, meaning if the telescope only has one or two mirrors or lenses in the optical train, we're talking doublets, simple Newtonians, Ritchey-Chrétiens, etc. It's going to probably suffer from some amount of field curvature. Unlike spherical aberration that affects the whole field of view equally, field curvature affects the edges of your images more than the center. So even though the light from any individual star is essentially parallel, the position of the stars in the sky are not parallel to each other. So a star that is to the right of the telescope's center will get focused on the left side of the sensor, for example. Even though the light of the stars from that star is parallel with itself, it's not hitting the lens or mirror straight on, and it's not parallel to the on-axis light. So, but wait, I hear some of you are probably already typing. This sounds like Coma. Well, we'll get into Coma in a bit, but field curvature is an off-axis aberration like Coma. And many simple optical systems produce their best focus on a curved surface rather than a flat plane. Your eyes are a good example. Light that is off-axis and gets focused on the edge of the image circle will get focused onto a curved surface. Your eye compensates for this by having a curved retina, but your camera's sensor is flat, probably. If your stars look kind of bowl-shaped, where the stars in the middle look focused and the ones on the edge look off focus, you get a 3D effect that makes things look curved on the outside or inside of the bowl, depending on how you think about it. So this is what that looks like. Field curvature affects different parts of your sensor differently, so getting more pronounced the further away from the center of the sensor that it is. So again, how can you tell if it's field curvature? Well, if you focus a bit, then the stars at the outer part of the sensor should come into focus. The inner stars start to be out of focus. So this is what that looks like across the whole field of view, focusing in and out. Well, how do you fix that? It's kind of simple. So if your eyes came from a factory that has good quality control, the lens in your eye and your retina correct for most vision problems. But there is a condition called keratoconus, where your cornea, not the lens, but the cornea has an irregular shape. This can cause blurry vision. One of the things that can happen is you look at a star and part of the star is blurry and part of it is in focus. Things look distorted, kind of like a comet shape, and the cornea is making some of the parallel rays focus at slightly different spots on your retina. This can cause what is known as coma. All right, now let's get into coma. Coma is a bit weird, kind of like keratoconus. Do you remember why we had spherical aberration? Well, nothing was in focus because the parallel rays at different parts of the mirror came to focus at different points. Well, for some telescope designs, with an off-axis star, each concentric zone of the mirror doesn't focus to one point at all. It focuses to a small ring, and each zone's ring is a different size, all tangent to one point. I'll probably have a visualization here for you to look at. So you stack these rings from every zone together and you get kind of a comet shape. Contrary to popular belief, this doesn't just affect Newtonians. It can affect almost any telescope type. It's just very pronounced in Newtonians and it can bother a lot of people. The difference between this and field curvature is that with field curvature, the light from an off-axis star stays together in roughly the same spatial relationship. But with Coma, parallel rays don't stay in the same spatial relationship. As they come to focus, the farther out on the mirror an off-axis star's light comes from, and where that light hits on a concentric circle determines where it lands on the sensor. So the pattern gets progressively worse as you move to the edge of the image circle. Unlike field curvature, you can't focus your way out of the problem. You can't just focus inward and all the stars at the edges would become fixed. You have to do something else. When someone is diagnosed with astigmatism, usually that means that their cornea or lens isn't perfectly round like a sphere. It kind of has two curves that can make it easy to focus in one direction, like light coming in vertically, but hard to focus in the other direction, like light coming in horizontally. So what happens is things can get kind of streaky or blurry in a weird way. Telescopes can also suffer from astigmatism. Every telescope can have it to some degree. In fact, it's the magnitude of astigmatism that matters. The type of astigmatism I'm mostly talking about here is related to poor optics or bad manufacturing. I've got a small 3D print here. The inside of the 3D print, we can draw two axes along, two lines that go through the edge of the center of this parabola to the other edge, and we can draw them at right angles to each other. The result should be two parabolic curves. Now, if the curves are identical, then we're fine, and we're just going to have minimal astigmatism, probably at the edges. But if they're not, then we're going to get astigmatism that's noticeable. Parallel light rays coming from an off-axis star don't all come to the same focus. Instead, the rays focus in two different directions and at two different distances. Your stars will look like an oval that points in one direction when you're focused at one of these 2 points, and an oval pointing in the other direction when you're focused at the other point. So this is what that looks like, going in and out of focus. If you see strong astigmatism even near the center of your field, that's a red flag. The fix depends on the cause of the astigmatism. Sometimes astigmatism can be irregular, meaning you may have an uneven cornea or uneven lens. There's uneven curvature in multiple parts of your visual system, and this makes things really blurry and can be a real problem. So like irregular astigmatism, your telescope can also have multiple asymmetric curves in it. But these are usually due to pinch optics. Your mirror or lens has to be attached to your telescope somehow. If things are tightened too tightly, then the mirror, usually it's a mirror, but refractors can sometimes have it too, whatever your objective is gets distorted where those pressure points are. And this is what that can look like. Can your eyes suffer from multiple problems and have that affect your vision? Of course they can. When this happens, it can be really difficult to correct your vision. Let's talk about some honorable mentions. There are other things that can mess up your star shapes that I won't get into so as much in this video, such as miscollimation, tilt, and chromatic aberration. When your mirrors or lenses aren't perfectly lined up, you can get miscollimation. When the optical elements aren't lined correctly with one another, you can also get miscollimation. In a Schmidt-Cassegrain, for example, the primary and secondary mirrors have to be aligned so that the optical axis of the system is properly centered. If you are miscollimated, then your stars are going to look kind of blurry. You might get some really bad coma and you're not going to be happy. Tilt is when your camera sensor isn't perfectly square with the mirrors. You'll see one side out of focus compared to the other side. Collimation looks kind of like field curvature, but the center of the bowl is off, whereas tilt usually just changes one axis on the center, so one side of your image might be look like it's in focus and the other side looks like it's blurry. Chromatic aberration affects many refractors and lenses. So different colors focus at different points when the light passes through glass. So you might see blue or purple fringing on your stars. Before we go any further, there's an important distinction. Some of these are intrinsical optical aberrations, and others are problems with how the system is assembled or aligned. And then there's seeing, which isn't really an optical aberration at all, but your camera doesn't care what caused the blur. It just records the combined result. What makes diagnosing aberrations problematic is any of the aberrations I just mentioned are also combined with seeing. They can also be combined with each other. A Newtonian may suffer from field curvature and coma. Coma is probably much worse than the field curvature, so you may not care about it as much. Or miscollimation may exacerbate everything. Let's take a look at the example from the beginning. I told you that this was not field curvature, and it's not. It's a combination of miscollimation, coma, and pinch optics. When you combine aberrations, it's like multiplying integers together. And higher integers means worse stars. For example, your seeing may contribute a 2 to the star shapes. Miscollimation is a 10, and coma is a 2, and pinch optics is a 2. You can multiply all those together and you get 80. The problem is, you don't know which numbers make up 80 in real life. Is it 4 for seeing and 20 for coma? Maybe 20 for miscollimation and 4 for pinched optics. Everything tends to blur together and you sit there scratching your head wondering what's going on. To really diagnose what's going on, you need to do a few things. You need to recognize that aberrations are correctable with tools or correctable with additional optics. And in some cases, like seeing, that's not really correctable. And I don't often hear people speaking about this order enough. So the first thing you want to do is fix all the aberrations you can with tools. Fixing with tools also means checking back focus, tilt, collimation, and pinch optics. Take out your Allen wrenches and get to work. You may be using a coma corrector, for example, or a field flattener, or a reducer, or something else. Usually the distance between that accessory's last optical element, the last lens, and the sensor should be 55 millimeters. So you may need some spacers to get correct back focus. K-Star's aberration inspector can tell you exactly how far off you are and whether you need to bring the camera forward or backward relative to the reducer or corrector. If your camera has a tilt adjuster, fix the tilt. There is debate online about what to do first, collimation or tilt. I would say use Nina or K-Star's aberration inspectors to fix your tilt first. Okay, editor Mark here. Thinking about this more, let me try to explain my process better. I go into an imaging session already having done a rough collimation with a laser or using my eyes to make sure the mirrors are aligned. I found that if I have good rough collimation, K-Stars will give the same result regardless of whether my scope is well collimated or roughly collimated. So when I'm saying fix the tilt first, I'm already roughly collimated, and I'm generally working outside underneath the stars. Then I can get better collimation by adjusting my secondary mirror if I'm using my SCT, or primary mirror with my hyperbolic Newtonian. I've kind of found that the one in K-Stars fixes most of my tilt issues regardless of the collimation, unless the collimation is super bad. Once you know your camera is square with the incoming light, then you can work on your collimation. Now, you may have to go back and forth a bit, but you just need to be patient and make sure the parallel lines are hitting your lenses and mirrors, and then the sensor as perfectly as possible. So let's talk about how to fix pinch optics. If you do have pinch optics, do this step before messing with back focus, tilt, etc. If you have a refractor and there is pinch optics, you may need to send it back to the vendor. Not all refractors allow you to choose the lens elements. If you have a reflector, usually you can remove the mirror and adjust the clips or tension that the clips are putting on the mirror. If it's too tight, you'll have pinch optics. If it's too loose, well, you'll have mirror flop and you'll never be in collimation. So you want tension so that the mirror doesn't move, but enough looseness that you can barely fit a thin piece of paper between the mirror and the mirror clips. So the second thing that you need to do, once you've done everything to fix stars with tools, to fix the pinch optics, you need to figure out what type of aberrations you have and fix them with additional optics. Generally, every astrograph can suffer from almost any aberration. Unless your telescope only has mirrors, then it really doesn't suffer from chromatic aberration. Or if you have a Ritchey-Chrétien telescope that's well collimated, it probably doesn't suffer from coma. But some astrographs are more prone to other types of aberrations, and you may need to add an additional piece of glass to fix it. So aberrations are generally more exaggerated in faster scopes than slower scopes. So if you have a fast scope like a RASA or Hyperstar, you really need to make sure you've fixed things with tools as much as you can first. So if you're suffering from a lot of astigmatism after collimation and getting rid of pinch optics, first just go back and double check whether your scope has any adjustable elements and try correcting for that alignment again. I know, it's weird. You just corrected it, but double check, triple check. Misalignment can cause center astigmatism too. So make sure that your optics are cooled down to ambient temperature. A mirror or telescope tube that is still expanding or contracting can cause pinch optics and cause astigmatism. So try having the scope outside for 30 to 90 minutes before you image. Also, as I mentioned earlier, Ritchey-Chrétiens usually have very low coma, but the trade-off is that they have a little bit more astigmatism as part of their design. So at the outer edges, you may notice that for an RC scope. So they try to eliminate coma because coma is more problematic for scientific measurements than astigmatism is. RC's astigmatism may become noticeable in the corners that you might just need to have to accept. If you've ruled out all of these things, or your scope has no adjustable elements, and you've already corrected for pinch optics, double and triple checking, there's not really much else you can do. You just need to reach out to your vendor. A well-made new scope without pinch optics or a misalignment shouldn't have very much astigmatism, especially in the center. There might be some in the corners, especially with a full-frame camera, but regardless of your telescope design, stuff in the center is a bad sign. So Newtonians suffer quite a bit from coma. I think a lot of people know this. And this is especially true at faster F ratios. Sometimes field curvature is also noticeable. You'll probably need a coma corrector. Your specific brand will most likely have a coma corrector that matches your telescope. Some are also corrector and flattener combos. Now, a standard Schmidt-Cassegrain is designed to correct spherical aberration with its Schmidt corrector, but it still may have significant field curvature and have some residual coma and astigmatism depending on the design and optical quality. Because the corrector is made of glass, the system also has some chromatic effects, although they're probably not even really noticeable and much less obvious than a doublet refractor. Having said that, my C8 I think does have a little bit of coma and a little bit of field curvature. It's an older C8. The newer designs like the Edge HDs probably have less of this problem. Classical Cassegrains, depending on the exact design, will suffer from coma and field curvature, but a lot depends on the shape of the primary and secondary mirrors. Plus, they're usually slower scopes, so problems aren't as noticeable. A Ritchey-Chrétien corrects for coma, as we've said. That's its real strength, but it is affected by field curvature and off-axis astigmatism. So you may want a field flattener to help you get rid of some of that. Again, RCs usually tend to be slower F ratios, so you may not notice their problems as much. Well, at least I don't with mine. A Maksutov-Cassegrain can, I think, theoretically suffer from anything as well. I don't see them used as much for deep sky imaging. I see them mostly for like planetary imaging. So I don't have as much experience with them. But I think at most consumer sizes, they're well corrected for a lot of things. Now, if you have a lot of money and can afford a Dall-Kirkham telescope, then good for you. Again, from what I understand, Dall-Kirkham suffer a lot from coma, and you either need to buy one that corrects for it or have a coma corrector for it. Now, most refractors for astrophotography are either doublets, triplets, or quadruplets. Doublets are generally the cheapest and will most likely need a field flattener. You'll probably have some chromatic aberration for bluer colors. Triplets and quadruplets are usually higher end and correct for mostly everything. Although with some triplets, you will probably still need a field flattener. If you do see coma, pinched optics, or astigmatism in a refracting telescope that's made for astrophotography, I would probably just send it back. Well, there you go. Let me know if I missed anything. I've got some affiliate links to Amazon, High Point Scientific, SV Boni, and Agena Astro if you would like to use them to support the channel. It costs you nothing and can really help me buy some more hard drive space. And I'd also like to thank all my Buy Me a Coffee and channel members. I appreciate their support. Their names are here. Again, they're helping me buy more hard drive space. If you would like to know more about beginning astrophotography, I've got a video with 130 of the most common astrophotography terms, some of which I went through in this video, or another video that the algorithm recommends. Thanks for watching.